Perfect. So today I'll be talking a little bit about LGBTQ plus rep in music and how you can be an ally. So a little bit about me. My name's Fraser Bryan. I am a second year music business student at the University of Gloucestershire. And I'll be talking a little bit about what it's like to be an LGBT person. I think it is gone. Hang on. Working in the music industry. So first of all, talk a little bit about safety. Safety is one of the biggest concerns for LGBTQ plus people. So choosing a venue is something that has to be a little bit more strategical. So for example, a lot of LGBT people will struggle playing gigs in more conservative areas of America, and then places like Dubai and Russia. As being LGBT is also still illegal in many countries, so artists are limited to where they can perform. Little Mix were praised for defiantly flying the LGBTQ plus flag at a concert in Dubai. That is where homosexuality is still illegal. But the fact the group were performing there in the first place when openly LGBTQ plus artists weren't able to indicates that the market sometimes trumps the morals. And I know that Matty Healy also kissed a male fan in Dubai at one of their concerts, and that was actually quite dangerous because the fan could have been arrested or something even worse happened to him. So sometimes, like straight and cis artists need to recognize their privilege and where they're sitting from. There's a lot of gay shame and straight washing in the music industry. So Will Young spoke about overcoming gay shame, writing that the avoidance of it is often what drives LGBTQ plus people to toxic and unhealthy behaviors. And when I talk about gay shame, I mean about being scared of being gay or being trans and trying to overcome that in order to come out and have a healthy relationship with your identity. In the workplace, evading questions about family life can be like dodging bullets. And if you think that revealing your sexuality will make work relations difficult, LGBT people like myself are very aware that we live in a heteronormative society. So at work, sometimes I can find it difficult to tell other people that I have a boyfriend, for fear that they might not accept that or say something bad about me behind my back. And trans people whose sexuality has nothing to do with the discrimination they encounter can face further stigma still due to widespread lack of understanding about the issue. Many people choose to leave their workplace in order to undergo their transition. Musicians such as Sam Smith, who openly identifies as non-binary, are faced with a dilemma. Do they risk alienating audiences singing about LGBTQ plus themes and relationships that aren't just abstract concepts, or do they get accused of straight washing their music? This is a label that Smith has been slapped with for using gender neutral pronouns in their lyrics. So this is like sometimes the LGBT fans can accuse artists of doing this straight washing. But then again, Sam Smith's album sales began to fall when the singer became more public about their queerness as well. So we'll move on to pressure to be politically active. There is a pressure on public figures to be politically active, but there is an even greater pressure on LGBTQ plus artists to explicitly express their sexuality or gender identity and advocate on behalf of the whole community. That pressure isn't entirely unjustified because the silence is a form of oppression, and in an industry built upon sharing a message and it can be difficult to navigate. But then I go back to the fact that Sam Smith's album sales started to drop when they were open about their queerness. And sometimes LGBT artists don't want to be seen as just LGBT, and that can be really difficult when you're navigating an industry that sort of wants to have you as a commodity and wants you to be open just for that sort of marketing, but actually it might negatively affect you and be dangerous for you then to play shows in certain places, so it can limit you as an artist. So that's when I come on to the fact that Pride is being constantly commercialized. Pride's commercialization does help to institutionalize the acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community in a society which has been slow to catch up. If a brand endorses Pride, it sets a good example for other brands and members of society to follow. Um, but then again, people think that Pride in London is more about the celebration of corporate companies accepting LGBT people rather than actually celebrating the community itself. It appears that Pride Month has experienced a shift in the meaning, like from community based to brand based, although many people agreed that this was necessary for the good of the community. Pride is now more of a commercial music festival throughout the country and the world. For example, Manchester Pride, the tickets, the lowest you can buy one for is £10, but they go up to £275. This makes Pride like no longer a family friendly event and can alienate a lot of queer people that experience poverty, and it excludes them from events that are made to celebrate them. And then this is the topic of LGBTQ plus topics seen as a commodity. Mainstream artists now more than ever can be seen as a commodity and a brand which is to be bought and sold by marketing and record companies. Is there ever a danger of using an artist's LGBT like status rather than their music to sell albums? And I think this is completely true. Um, a lot of the time, people can just see LGBT people as what they identify as. So, like when approaching a company, if I want an internship, sometimes I'm scared that they'll see that I'm a trans person and say that ticks the diversity box, and brands are constantly trying to find a new way to market people. And with LGBT topics being so political and hot for the press, like sometimes they can just jump on it and say, well, I want this for my brand because it looks like we're being accepted and inclusive, when actually they just want the tick on their box. So why is representation important? And one of the most important reasons for representation is the impact of LGBTQ plus visibility on music listeners. While visibility, I'm getting my words out, visibility may seem like an abstract or insignificant concept, it is an effective way of supporting the LGBTQ plus community. And I know that music had a massive impact on me as a teenager, and seeing openly queer artists like thriving and experiencing a lot of love in the music industry really encouraged me to not sort of dismiss it as a career option and like sort of push forward. And I know a lot of my friends have experienced that as well. So what can straight or cis people do to make sure that they are being inclusive? When I say cis, I mean cisgender. So if you are born female and still identify as female now, that makes you cis. They can fellow industry professionals irrespective of their gender or sexuality. This creates a sense of empowerment amongst others and sets an industry standard that can pave the way for change across society. So, by respecting your colleague's name and pronoun change, by accepting the fact that like you have a gay colleague and celebrating them means that it then becomes unacceptable for other people not to accept them. But this support isn't just needed during Pride. Keeping the conversation going and being aware of LGBTQ plus issues throughout the entire year is necessary to make change. Using the right name and pronouns on a regular basis can be more meaningful than you think. Guiding others on proper pronoun usage is a great way to support your trans friends and colleagues. Um, so, for example, if I saw somebody sticking up for me at work and saying, you can't use she when referring to Fraser, you need to use he, um, that would give me a great sense of being supported at work and like the people cared about like my identity. Try and suggest LGBTQ plus awareness training at your workplace. It's just little bits like this all the time, just not necessarily making a big deal out of it, but just accepting that this that needs to be done and needs to be more widely accepted. So how can you be a better ally? So first of all, listen to your LGBT colleagues, your friends, your family members, and take in what they're saying and really think about it. And not just in the sense of like, oh, they said this, and oh, I think that could be a good point, but challenge your own behavior and how you perceive like queer people in every sort of sense of your life, and the sort of comments like, I've never met a trans person before, I've never seen one, oh, none of my family members are gay, because you do never know. And having this sort of attitude and constantly challenging your behavior creates a much better environment for you to be more accepting and speak up if you ever like hear someone think derogatory towards LGBT people. Have that confidence to sort of say something. And so now I'm going to move on to a Q&A with two other university students, so Joliver and Grayson Livingston. I'm just going to stop sharing and turn my camera on. And if Joe and Grayson want to turn their cameras on as well. Perfect. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello. Right. I don't think I can hear you. So
yeah, my signal's a bit.
Sorry, technical difficulty. I might have to put some headphones in.
Yep.
There's some headphones talking about.
Sick.
Uh-huh.
You got some? You need to put them in here in the headphone.
I don't think I've got an adapter.
Do you want me to unplug it and it should come out of the screen?
Yeah.
No.
All right. Try again. Ah. I don't know.
Go into your settings. And
It's
go
not
to
sound. Yeah. Output.
Yep.
Internal speakers.
Yep.
Right. Right. Can I hear you now? Do you want to say something?
Hello.
Perfect. Right. Actually working. Right. So do you just want to quickly introduce yourself, starting with Joe first?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a master's student doing creative music practice. Just working on my final project at the moment.
Wicked. And then Grayson, you want to introduce yourself as well? Oh, appears to have frozen. We'll hang on 2 seconds. Right. While we're waiting for it to unfroze, Joe, do you have any like sort of questions, or what are your thoughts on being an LGBT person in the music industry? What are the sort of struggles you've faced or challenges you've had?
Yeah. Well, I've been quite lucky because I've never really faced any issues of like discrimination or anything myself personally.
Yeah.
But obviously there's like things that you see, or things like, you have to actively search a lot of the time for LGBT artists. It's not a case of like, some obviously kind of like pop up into like popularity, like Hayley Kiyoko and King Princess, but a lot of them you have to actively search for them, and you have to search quite hard for some of them. I think that's probably part of the problem, because it just that you don't have that immediate visibility, and you might not know what to look for either.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I feel like sometimes people might not face issues because they have a lot of passing privilege, and not being seen as you. If you look at someone and say, you don't automatically assume that they might be queer, you can sort of get away with a lot more instead of being like open and stuff like that. But yeah, Grayson, did you want to introduce yourself and then maybe say a little bit about that?
Could you repeat the question, because my internet cut out like when you said
That's completely fine. So the question is, if you could just introduce yourself, and then have you ever faced any difficulties being an LGBT person in the music industry?
So I'm Grayson Livingston. A few of you on the call might know me as something different, but that is my preferred name. My pronouns are they, them, and I identify as non-binary. I mean, within music, I feel like specifically at university, it's been quite easy to be accepted and stuff like that. But in terms of like at work and stuff as well, like I've not really talked a lot about, myself and my identity and stuff, because I'm not really aware, or it's quite hard to be out in like a public setting sometimes, specifically with a non-binary identity, because it's not really a well-known thing or accepted thing. I mean, in music, I've not really had much of an issue, like, in terms of if I say, like, look, I'm queer, then I don't really get much problem with the people and the, you know, environments that I've worked in. But I definitely, you know, are aware that when leaving university and going into like a more professional like environment, it might be a lot harder then. So I'm kind of just sort of preparing for that sort of shift in terms of, you know, accessibility to like queer positive spaces as well. Because that's if I'm going to be like self-employed, for instance, in the music industry, I'm going to have to sort of balance whether I say about my identity and then might not get further because of that or stuff like that. So that there's sort of issues that I'm preempting happening as I leave university, but currently it's not really been much of an issue.
And I think that is sort of the problem, that as a queer person, you constantly have to second guess whether you're safe to come out, because like 90% of the time it's completely fine. They sometimes might not understand it, but a lot of people can be too scared to say anything, and they will just respect it. But it is just that 10% of the time that if you come out and it isn't safe, you've created an environment for yourself that is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
It's not knowing how to deal with it or having the support network to deal with sort of situation like that. That is a problem in the music industry. So I think sometimes it's all well and great brands putting a pride flag on their bottles of vodka and having a pride like flag in the window of their shop and saying like, oh, we do support the LGBT community, but then no physical action coming from that, or not actively speaking out against brands that aren't inclusive, is a problem in the music industry, especially with the commercialization of Pride, and having brands that aren't actually LGBT friendly at Pride.
There's also like, going off the back of what you've just said, like in terms of brands who do say like, you know, we're queer friendly and a pride flag, that doesn't always mean that it's safe for everyone in the LGBTQ community, because like there's within the community there's still discrimination and, you know, transphobia, what have you. Like it's sort of just one of those things you can never be 100% sure, even if, you know, they do say that they're like accepted, like you just don't know. And that's just sort of one of the rubbish things about it.
Yeah. Joe, as like a
thing
female
is,
leader of
they
that.
say,
Oh, sorry.
sorry,
Someone over
sorry.
to you, Karen.
I just want to say, just because they say they're supportive doesn't mean they're actually doing anything to, like, just saying, yeah, we support the community doesn't do anything. If they're not like donating or doing anything within their company to actually make that a better environment for people, then what do their words even mean?
Yeah. And how do you think record labels can sort of move forward and be more inclusive while not using like identity as a commodity? So like not just signing bands because they're queer, but because they have potential as artists. Like how do you think that they could sort of overcome that? Sorry, tricky question.
Maybe
Yeah,
like having just not really saying looking for queer artists, just more like just having a variety of, you know, people from different backgrounds, whether that's like ethnic backgrounds or queer backgrounds or anything, just having a diverse set of artists within itself sort of promote. And if their promotion around their label or publishers or whatever is showing these people, but just for themselves, not necessarily their identity, and just promoting their music and letting the artist decide whether or not they disclose their identity or not, is sort of, I think, sort of the best way to do that. And if companies are supportive of the LGBTQ community, then, you know, during Pride Month or whatever, use that time to maybe, obviously it's important to continually do that, no matter whether it's Pride Month or another time. But if you've got privilege such as straight and cis, like having those identities, then there's a time to speak up, and then there's a time to allow the LGBT people to just be themselves and, you know, decide themselves when to discuss those topics.
Yeah, definitely. Joe, do you have any comments about that?
I agree, really. It's a really tough one to kind of just be like, this is what you need to do to improve it. But yeah, I agree. Just widening your kind of search range, I suppose, if you're looking, or just, yeah, like making sure that you've got a lot of diversity kind of on your bill. I guess that's like the biggest step that you can do to ensure that you're doing it, and then hopefully it just comes naturally based on these things that you put in place.
Yeah, I 1,000% with what you said, Grayson, about artists being able to choose whether they come out or not. Because like I just said, there is so much pressure to be politically active and to speak up and to have all of these views, and that's great. Like, it's great that some artists feel comfortable enough in their identity and secure in their sort of career. They feel like they can do that without facing that much backlash. But sometimes, I mean, I heard Ryan Casata talk about it, that he has a couple of very famous songs about being a trans person, but also he just wants to be recognised for being a good artist. And the fact that he's LGBT, like, not making that like big of an issue about it. And I know that he won an award that was regarding his recovery as an addict, and he said it was really refreshing to be recognised for something that wasn't like pushing the boundaries as a trans musician. But no, yeah, that's really great. Any other comments about sort of the state of the industry and like being a queer person in that sort of space?
I feel like artists who aren't LGBTQ, like for instance, the simplicity of like putting pronouns in bios or just making it aware a normal thing. Because for me, like, I'd find it pretty awkward if I find it difficult to be like, look, my pronouns are they, them, or to correct someone when I first meet them, because it's just like, I don't know what your opinions are or views are on LGBTQ identity and the community as a whole. Like, but having, you know, showing the LGBTQ community that you are aware that pronouns are important by putting your own pronouns for everyone else to see, it's like, then I'm not going to feel as, you know, nervous or apprehensive about sharing my own pronouns because it's people are making it just a normal regular thing. Because if I know that someone is queer and my friends, and I say, look, I prefer you to use these pronouns, then likelihood is it will be fine. But for those I don't know, if you know, have a little bit of courage and just to put that about yourself, it's quite simple to do, and it's, you know, it goes a long way, I think.
Yeah. Do you think as well that a lot of the issues that have been like prevalent in the music industry are focusing less on being gay and more on being trans, as like the acceptance of gay people has become a lot more widespread in society, and it's now trans people are experiencing a lot more issues? How do you think that split is on, or like in terms of representation?
I mean, I have definitely noticed that there's sort of been a shift in terms of what discussions are being had. And I guess, like, back when, you know, gay artists were coming out and, you know, speaking up for the community, that was sort of all that it was talked about, and trans topics weren't really discussed much. But I think now it's sort of shifted in terms of, now it's sort of the tone for trans people to like sort of speak up and educate the industry on it.
Yeah. What do you sort of think?
And it's, yeah, I think it's just becoming another topic that needs to be talked about.
Definitely. Joe, what do you think about
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember, probably as a little bit older, I remember like when trans was just like barely brought up in any sort of LGBT conversation. So it's so great actually to have seen how much it's come to the forefront in recent years. It definitely, I think, still needs to be more of a conversation in music. But I think it all does really, because especially in like mainstream pop music, you still don't see many trans artists or non-binary artists. So I think it's like such a huge deal that Sam Smith, for example, has come out and has been very open about their pronouns. And yeah, I think that's exactly it. It has come quite a way in the time that I've seen, but I think there's still definitely conversations to be had.
Yeah, and I think like just sort of wrapping this up, as a university and like as students of like UoG, what do you think like our uni could do more to support LGBT students, or and in particular LGBT music students, like stuff talking about in lectures or like hosting more gigs that are like queer themed? What do you guys sort of think about that?
It's a hard one to answer, because it's the little things go the furthest, in my opinion. Just so like even mentioning, using examples from queer artists, or at the start, if you've got a new class, or like tutors, for example, like if a new year group starts, just being like, look, this is a all welcoming space, no matter your background, identity, gender, etc. Like making it known that it's a safe space for those students. Because I know, like on my first day, like my first lecture, Andrew mentioned that, and that was a really important thing for me, and that made me feel safe and like, okay, well, I know of at least one tutor that I could go to if I have an issue with that. And then it's gotten better, and I've picked up on more staff members that have sort of mentioned queer artist or queer themed stuff in lectures. I'm like, okay, well, they are aware of it, and it's
No, definitely. No, I completely agree. I remember Andrew's lecture as well, when he sort of said, if you want to use a different pronoun or name at any point, just let me know, and really made it clear that it was safe. And that made me feel a lot better about being like a trans person in his class. But no, Joe, what do you think?
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the small things that normalize it that really helps, especially when you're bringing in, say, like younger students or freshers who may be coming from an environment where they haven't heard much about that, and that's not something that's been part of their general conversational vocabulary, whether they're part of the community or not. I think it's really helpful in both senses, just to have that sort of environment from day one, to know that that's the sort of environment everybody is in.
Yeah.
And that like everybody's going to be accepted and intolerance won't be tolerated.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a great place to sort of wrap up there. Thank you everyone very much for coming, and to Grayson and Joe for joining me for this last bit of questions. If anyone wants the slides, because I have a fair bit of resources and stuff, just like drop me an email or drop a message on the chat. But other than that, thank you very much for coming along, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.